The night had already gone wrong before the whisper. Ethan Cole stood near the edge of the underground parking garage, one hand gripping the steering wheel of his old sedan, the other clenched tightly in his lap as if holding his entire life together by force. The engine idled softly, a tired sound that matched the exhaustion etched into his bones. It had been a long day, longer than most, and when you were a single dad, every day already felt like a marathon run uphill. Upstairs, the company's annual executive gala was still in full swing. Crystal chandeliers, tailored suits, laughter that didn't worry about tomorrow. Ethan wasn't part of that world. He never had been. He was just the driver tonight, the temporary replacement after another chauffeur called in sick. Extra money, overtime pay, enough to cover his daughter Lily's school trip she'd been too afraid to ask him for. That was why he was here. Not ambition, not curiosity. Survival. He checked his phone. No new messages. Lily would be asleep by now, probably hugging the stuffed bear he'd won for her at a roadside carnival years ago when life had been simpler. Back when his wife was still alive. Back when dreams didn't feel dangerous. A sudden echo of heels clicking against concrete snapped him back to the present. Ethan looked up. She walked toward him alone. Even in the dim light of the garage, Victoria Hale was unmistakable. Theo. Billionaire. The woman whose name made markets tremble and executives sweat. The woman who had rebuilt a collapsing tech empire into a global giant with nothing but ruthless intelligence and an iron will. She didn't just enter rooms. She commanded them. Tonight, she wore a midnight black dress that looked less like fashion and more like authority. Calm, precise, untouchable. And she was walking straight toward him. Ethan swallowed hard and opened the car door, slipping into professional mode. Eyes forward. Polite distance. No mistakes. "Ms. Hale," he said respectfully, stepping out. "Your driver for the evening." She stopped inches away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He noticed things he hadn't meant to. How tired her eyes looked beneath the flawless makeup. How her shoulders were tense, as if the weight of the entire company rested there even now. This wasn't the woman the magazines showed. This was someone holding herself together by discipline alone. Then she leaned in. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to change everything. Her voice dropped, soft and controlled, meant for him alone. "Take me home tonight." Ethan froze. The words didn't register at first. His mind scrambled for the professional meaning. Home address, company residence, standard procedure. But the way she said it, the pause, the intensity, the quiet crack beneath the strength, told a different story. He met her eyes by accident and saw something he had never expected. Not power, loneliness. I'm sorry, ma'am," he said carefully. "Could you confirm the address?" For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, then resolve. "My home," she repeated. "Not the penthouse listed with the company." She straightened and stepped back, slipping the mask of CEO perfection back into place. "Please." That single word carried more weight than any command she'd given upstairs. Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. "Of course." As they got into the car, silence wrapped around them. The kind that pressed against your chest and forced memories to surface. The car rolled out of the garage and into the city lights. Minutes passed. Then Victoria spoke again. "Do you have children?" she asked suddenly, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Ethan hesitated. "Yes, a daughter." "How old?" 7. Another pause. "She's lucky." He didn't know how to respond to that. Lily had lost her mother at 3. Lucky was a complicated word. Traffic slowed. Red lights reflected across the windshield like warnings. "I saw you earlier," Victoria continued quietly. During the speech, Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. "Ma'am, you weren't watching me," she said. "You were watching your phone. Waiting." He exhaled. "My daughter gets scared if I'm late." Something softened in her expression. "I envy that," she said. That was when he realized this drive wasn't about directions. It was about escape. The city fell away as they entered a quieter neighborhood. Trees, space, privacy. Her real home emerged behind iron gates that slid open silently, as if even the world knew better than to disturb her. Ethan parked and turned off the engine. Neither moved. The silence returned, but heavier now. Victoria finally turned to him. "You know," she said, "everyone assumes I have everything." He didn't speak. "They don't see the nights I sit in boardrooms alone long after the lights go out. Or the holidays I cancel because the stock market doesn't care about feelings." She laughed softly. Not humor. Resignation. "You look at me like a person," she added. "Not a title." Ethan felt something dangerous stir in his chest. "I don't mean to," he said honestly. "It just happens." Her eyes searched his face, as if weighing a risk she rarely allowed herself to take. "Stay," she said, point one word. Not a command, but a request. Ethan's mind screamed no. His life was simple, complicated enough. He had rules, lines he didn't cross. But then he thought of Lily, of the years he'd spent saying no to everything, of the nights he'd fallen asleep wondering if this was all life would ever be, and of the woman in front of him, powerful yet visibly alone. "I can't stay long," he said quietly. Victoria nodded. "I don't need long." As he stepped out of the car, Ethan didn't know that this moment, the whisper, the choice, would rewrite his future. And if you're still listening right now, this is where lives begin to collide in ways no one expects. Backhand index pointing right. If you want to know what happens when a single dad steps into the private world of a woman who controls empires, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the next part will change everything. Ethan barely slept, not because of where he was, but because of what it meant. The guest room was quiet, too quiet for a man used to the hum of a small apartment, the soft breathing of a child down the hall, the constant awareness that everything depended on him waking up on time. Here, the silence felt expensive, heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. Sunlight crept through the tall windows, spilling across polished floors and walls decorated with art that probably cost more than his car. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, staring at nothing. Last night replayed in fragments. The quiet conversation in the living room. The way Victoria had removed her heels like a woman shedding armor. The long pauses between sentences where neither of them rushed to fill the space. Nothing reckless had happened, and yet everything had changed. He heard footsteps. Ethan stood instinctively, smoothing his shirt like an employee caught in a private moment. The door opened gently. Victoria Hale stood there, barefoot, hair loose, wearing a simple sweater that made her look less like a CEO and more like a woman who hadn't slept either. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Ethan replied. For a moment, neither moved. Then she smiled. "Not the practiced one. A real one. I wasn't sure you'd still be here." "I wasn't sure either," he admitted. She nodded, understanding more than he'd said. "Coffee?" she asked. They sat at the kitchen island like strangers learning each other's language. Steam rose from mugs. Outside, the city felt a million miles away. "You can leave any time," Victoria said. "I won't be offended." Ethan looked at her. Really looked. "For someone who commands thousands of people," he said carefully, "you seem used to being alone." Her fingers tightened around the mug. "I chose it," she said. "At first." Silence again. Then it stopped feeling like a choice. Ethan thought of Lily, of bedtime stories read twice because she asked him not to stop, of being needed in a way that anchored him to the world. "I didn't come here to complicate your life," Victoria continued. "Last night, I just didn't want to feel invisible." "You weren't," Ethan said immediately. She met his eyes, surprised. "You saw me," she whispered. Yes. That was the moment something broke between them. Not boundaries, but distance. Ethan checked his phone. A message from Lily's babysitter glowed on the screen. "She woke up early. Asked for you." Guilt stabbed him. "I should go," he said. Standing, Victoria nodded, hiding disappointment with grace he admired. "I'll have a driver take you." He shook his head. "I'll manage." At the door, she stopped him. "Ethan," she said. He turned. "This doesn't have to be just one night." The words hung in the air, Not a promise, not a demand, not a possibility. I don't know how this fits into my life, he said honestly. Neither do I, she replied, but I'd like to find out. He left with his heart heavier and fuller than it had been in years. The trouble began 3 days later. Ethan was back to routine. School drop-offs, late shifts, quiet dinners with Lily laughing about small things that mattered more than stock prices ever could. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Cole, a voice said. This is Victoria Hale. His breath caught. I need to see you. At the office. Not as a guest. As an employee. The whispers started the moment he walked in. Assistants stared. Executives paused mid-sentence. Rumors moved faster than elevators. Victoria was waiting in the conference room. This isn't personal, she said once they were alone. At least, not only. She slid a folder across the table. I want you as my personal driver. Full-time. With benefits. Flexible hours. Ethan stared at the numbers. This is more than I make in a year. I know. People will talk. They already do, she said calmly. He hesitated. Why me? Victoria leaned forward. Because you don't want anything from me. That was the most dangerous answer she could have given. He accepted. The backlash was immediate. Board members questioned her judgment. Colleagues smirked. One executive cornered Ethan and muttered, enjoy it while it lasts. But Victoria didn't waver. Neither did Ethan. Until the night Lily got sick, high fever, hospital lights, fear that ripped through him deeper than any financial insecurity ever had. Victoria arrived without warning, sat beside Lily's bed, held Ethan together when he nearly broke. I don't want you to choose, she said quietly. I want to support. That was when Ethan realized. This wasn't a fantasy. It was a collision of two lives built on responsibility. And the world was watching as Ethan tucked Lily into bed that night. He understood something terrifying and beautiful. Loving someone powerful didn't mean standing behind them. It meant standing beside them, no matter the cost. And as Victoria watched from the doorway, eyes soft with something dangerously close to hope, she knew her empire was no longer the most important thing she'd built. If this story pulled you in, if you felt the tension, the vulnerability, the choices that change lives, backhand index pointing right, subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this remind us that even the strongest hearts need someone to come home to.